I got up that morning with gravel in my mouth and a woman in a Mercedes on my mind, the kind of morning that tells you before coffee, whatever peaceful little world you've built is about to get rearranged. She stepped out in pastels and a smile that smelled like litigation, looked over my lake like it was an open-air mall and said, "We'd love to use your shoreline for our family festival." Yeah, that was the hook right there in 3 sentences. They wanted my lake, they thought they could take it, and I had enough scraps of stubborn to make them regret it. My name's Miles Decker, 44. Ex-Special Forces, the kind of guy who treats perimeter as a religion, and these 110 acres in Tallapoosa County are mine every messed up inch. I bought the place broken mud and stumps in a dead lake, and I fixed it with my hands with sweat with the kind of stubborn patience you only learn after a few tours. Out here, peace isn't theory, it's perimeter. It's the sound of your boots on pine needles before dawn, the creak of a dock you built when no one else was watching the small, lonely music of a place you made yours. She called herself Karen Ventris, president of Cotton Ridge Shores HOA, and she had a team in tow who thought the word community gave them rights it didn't. They rolled up like they were hosting a polo match, handed a garbage permit mock-up to a guy with a hammer, and tried to set up folding tables on my shoreline as if I were imaginary. They'd labeled half my forest overflow parking on their fake map, a map so sloppy it might as well have been drawn with crayons. I told them to get off my land. They smiled, like that meant something like smiles can rewrite deeds. I logged everything. Body cam, trail cams, GPS timestamps, photos of the bogus permit. When the kids in kayaks drifted in like a scene rehearsed for maximum sympathy, and Auntie Karen appeared clutching a clipboard, an outrage I didn't play the part they'd written for me. Calm voice documented facts, the sheriff on speaker. Within 15 minutes, deputies were on my drive and issued trespass warnings. Karen left red-faced, but I could smell the way they'd regroup. People who cheat the rules don't like losing. They prefer to double down and make the loss somebody else's fault. And that is when things went sideways. The lock at my gate wasn't cut. It was torqued, the shackle twisted as if by a pry bar, and someone had dumped a chemical cocktail into my inlet, paint thinner, fertilizer, motor oils. A security camera had been ripped down and stolen. Somebody tried to kill my lake. Not an accident, an escalation. The night footage showed a white GMC Sierra idling off-road, the same model a certain HOA vice president owned. Coincidence? Not in this story. I took the evidence to Sheriff Darnell. He smelled the water sample and grimaced, said words like environmental hazard and state jurisdiction. And suddenly my little war had legs. We filed reports called environmental quality, and I went full defensive, new cameras, motion lights, a buried GPS logger at the gate, the sort of paranoid landscaping veterans make a habit of. That night I sat on my dock, bourbon in hand at sunset, thinking about how they assumed I'd be the one to snap. Turns out spending a life in chaos teaches you to use it as focus, not fear. They came again at night, stealthy and certain. Floodlights cut the woods into morning generators, coughed speakers half unpacked. I walked out, spotlight in hand, 12-gauge slung over my shoulder, not to start a war, but to make the choice they were forcing less attractive. Their pickup tried to run the line. I fired a beanbag into its radiator. It stalled like a stunned fish. Bloodless but decisive. Deputies arrived, cuffs clicked, and Bradley Meyer, vice president meathead with a truck and an ego, found himself tasting handcuffs. Court moved fast. Emergency injunction, Judge Harwell, a circuit transfer with no HOA, allegiances, and suddenly the whole thing was under a microscope. The hearing room smelled faintly of old coffee and paper, the kind of place where reputations are peeled like fruit, messy and oddly revealing. I sat in a bench with drone stills, body cam logs, rental receipts, bank statements, and a voicemail Karen left that sounded like she was reading from a playbook. "This is our lake now," she said casually, like she was talking about a park bench. When I played that recording for the judge, the room went very quiet. Evidence is a loud kind of truth. Then came Trevor Mills, a junior board member who decided he couldn't keep dressing up the books for the theater anymore. He slipped me ledgers showing off book accounts, money moved for phantom projects, and security invoices that paid nobody. He said I couldn't sleep and handed the files to the DA. Trevor's confession was the twist, the quiet little betrayal that made the whole scheme look less like a misunderstanding and more like a conspiracy. That belief that optics could rewrite ownership cost Karen everything, and for a second I felt something that wasn't triumph, so much as pity for someone who'd built a kingdom out of small cruelties. The dominoes fell fast. Karen was arrested at home at 2:30 a.m., sweater-clad and indignant, dragged into a world her press releases had never had to answer to. Charges piled up: conspiracy, forgery, environmental pollution, misappropriation of HOA funds. Bradley and a couple of others pled out, got fines, community service, small fish trying to scurry away. Cotton Ridge's glossy brochures turned into dusty evidence folders. The HOA collapsed within weeks. Accounts were frozen, board members resigned, and a federal administrator stepped in to sort the wreckage. There was courtroom justice, yes, but the satisfying part was quieter. I used settlement money to fix what they'd tried to break: better cameras, thermal imaging, license plate readers, a proper gate. I restocked the fish, reinforced the shoreline, and installed a small communications relay for faster sheriff response. Then I started talking. A blog post, then a few interviews, then a steady trickle of emails from people with similar stories: forged, permits, community claims, presidents, drunk on power. I made downloadable templates: how to pull a plat map, how to timestamp evidence, how to make a case that looks like armor. Here's the twist in the twist. No villain sees themselves clearly. Karen, in her own head, believed the narrative she sold at HOA meetings. The end justified the means. Optics were currency. It's a dangerous faith, more common than you'd think. Power makes small lies feel harmless until they've grown into ruin. Trevor turning in the books was the moment the whole thing unspooled, and for a second I felt something that wasn't triumph so much as pity for someone who'd built a kingdom out of small cruelties. If there's a moral, and I hate it when people pretend stories come packaged with tidy morals, it's this: ownership isn't just lines on a map, and justice isn't always loud. The real work is the slow, tedious proof of "this is mine," timestamps, drone clips, receipts, the grit of documenting. Power loves theater. Theater fools voters and neighbors, and sometimes even the law, until you replace their stage with records that show their whole play was a lie. Fight with proof, not rage. Papers and time-stamped footage win in rooms full of men who like rules. The end was rough but clean. Karen lost her house to restitution and her liberty to a state sentence. Bradley and the smaller players shuffled through plea deals. Cotton Ridge fell apart. The community that had cheered the festival plans slowly turned into a cautionary tale printed in the local paper. I got my lake back quiet and watchful, and messages started coming in from all over. People asking for help, asking for templates, asking how to be less alone in a fight. I taught them what I learned, then built a small toolkit so they wouldn't have to invent it the hard way. Karen sat on her porch smaller than the faded festival banner limp on a fence, and Karen sat on her porch smaller than the Mercedes had made her look. I tipped my hat. No viral moments, no gloating, just a slow, unmistakable message: you cannot take what isn't yours and expect to sleep soundly. So here's my question for you. When someone in a position of small local power decides to rewrite the rules for their convenience, do you stand your ground and document the hell out of it? Or do you let the theater win because it's easier? Tell me what you'd do. And if you've been on either side of that fence, the person who fought or the person who watched, be honest, what stopped you or what pushed you into the fight? If you want practical steps, plat map links, evidence checklists, and a template for contacting your local sheriff, I've got them in the pinned post. Share this with someone who needs to see it, and for God's sake, start filming when it matters. You don't need to be a warrior to protect what's yours. You just need patience and a folder that won't lie under oath.